Welcome to Real Raw Reinvented. This is where you will hear real stories, embrace the raw journey, and celebrate the beauty of being reinvented. Real Raw Reinvented is your invitation to witness the profound power of transformation through the lives of remarkable individuals who have courageously navigated the path of self-reinvention. Today, we're joined by the incredible Latoya Mathews. Latoya is not only an author, speaker, and coach, but also a devoted wife, mother, friend, and daughter. Her inspiring journey illuminates how shame can be passed down through generations and how it's possible to be the one who ends the cycle. By releasing these deep-seated burdens, Latoya found her true passion and purpose. Prepare to be moved by Latoya's story. Discover her pathway to release and get ready to be reinvented. Latoya, welcome to Real, Raw, and Reinvented. I am so excited to have this conversation with you about the transformation of shame into freedom. But more than that, the transformation of your story of shame into real passion and purpose and what you do today. And I have to say that your book, Unveiled Freedom, I was mentioning to you, there were times when I was in tears reading your story. It is so incredibly powerful and so inspiring. And I cannot wait to read some excerpts from it as we go through our conversation. But I just want to dive on in. And I'm the kind of person that I like to go way back and start in the beginning. And when you opened up your book, you actually talked about your mom and your mom's story. And we know through epigenetics, we know through science that many different traumas that we are carrying actually are traumas that were experienced before us. So through epigenetics, these traumatic experiences can actually be carried down into us. So can you tell me a little bit about your mom's shame? And do you think that potentially the shame that you were carrying was actually given to you through your mom's story?
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Jasmine, for having me.
Of
It is
course.
such an honor and a pleasure, to be here. And I knew from the very first moment that we met that it would be, something. And so I am grateful for the connection. And I'm just excited, to be here. So thank you so much for having me. But yeah, my mom was a senior in high school when she found out that she was pregnant, with me. And of course, it was something I'm pretty sure that she didn't want to tell my grandparents, her parents. And, abortion was not the option for her. And so, and I'm pretty sure there was some shame around that, being a senior in high school, being a teenager that became pregnant. And so, as you're talking about that, yes, I do believe that what the shame that she has had, brought down through me. And so, and I do believe that shame does transfer, from that type of situation or whatever you find yourself in. It is transferred to the child as well. So being a teenage mom, I couldn't begin to know exactly how she felt, but I'm pretty sure that she was scared and that there was some shame, around that. And so I asked her and I was like, listen, how did you feel when you found out that you were pregnant? And of course, she said in her mind, she did think about having an abortion, but my grandparents was not going for that. My grandparents supported her and, was there with her and just she was going to have this kid as a teenager. So there's so much even in my relationship with my daughter I can tell, but I had to do some work in order for that shame to be broken, for it not to be passed down to her. So yes, I do believe that is definitely passed down through generation to through generation. And I did some research on it, and there is shame based, generational shame based things that are transferred down and passed down through the family lineage. And so there are shame-based things that are passed down to our kids until we recognize that and begin to do the work to break that.
And I love how you're talking about the work that you need to do to break that so that you don't transfer it to your own children. And we're going to talk about your daughter. Her name is Rayanna, right?
Yes, yes.
We're going to talk. I love that name, by the way. Made me, when I was
Thank you.
reading your book and you brought her up, it made me think of a ray of sunshine. I was like, oh, how cute.
And that's what
We're
I
going
call
to
her. She's my ray of sunshine.
I love that. I love that. And we're going to talk about her because there's a component of your book where you talk about the story of having her and what that brought up for you. So we're going to get there, but I want to continue to kind of keep it old school, like kick it to the first moments of shame, right? The first moments where
Yes.
you now personally experienced it. So we talked about your mom, we talked about this concept and idea of epigenetics, of the passing down of trauma. What about your first experience of shame? Tell me about what that was like. What happened to you?
Yes, so in my book, I call it the Genesis because the Genesis
Yeah.
is the very beginning,
Yep.
of it. And I realized that shame did not start with the abortion that I had. Shame started way before then, and I didn't know it at the time. But through
Mhm.
writing my book, it was revealed that this is the genesis of where shame began to take root in my life. But abortion just was the yeast that magnified it, right? And so the genesis of my shame began in high school. And there was this boy that I really liked. And at the time, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my identity. I didn't know my worth. I was seeking attention. And
Mhm.
so there was this guy that I liked. And one thing led to another, and we had intercourse. And I came back to school, and I walked into my school having who I thought were my friends laughing at me. And I'm like, what are y'all, what are we laughing about? And come to find out, he had told his brother who was in my class, who then told other people. And so that was the first time I had ever experienced shame in my life. And I wanted to run and hide because I thought that we had something. I thought that something was there. And for you to tell other people about this and for them to show up in class and to talk about me, to make fun of me for something that I had done. I just remember just wanting to crawl under a rock and just disappear. And I knew that I couldn't talk to my mom about it because God forbid she didn't know I was having sex at that time. So, to be a teenager and having to experience that, it was a very, very low point for me because I didn't know my identity. I didn't know things about myself that I thought that I should have known at that time, or maybe someone could have poured into me to know, to understand that loving yourself first takes priority over finding love in someone else.
Absolutely. It's so amazing that you say that because I was I was married, and recently, 10 years later, I got divorced 10 years ago. And so much of this experience has been coming up for me now, 10 years later. It's crazy to think about it. But one of the things that I've really come to is that this individual that I was married to didn't even know who I was, like the real version of me,
Mm,
because I was seeking so
yeah.
much love and validation that I changed and molded myself to be the person that he wanted to love. And through
Yeah.
the experience of going through the divorce and growing and healing after, realizing that the best love is self-love, and that self-love has to come first. And oftentimes we don't recognize that because external love feels good for a moment, but it's only
Hmm.
a moment. That love that you have for yourself lasts a lifetime.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you talk about shame a lot in the book. I mean, I feel like this book is a testament to overcoming shame, which I think so many of us experience in very different ways. I feel like one of the biggest ways I've experienced shame was actually around money. I think we can experience shame in so many different ways. How would you define shame? And how do you think shame really holds us back from being the being that we want to be?
Well, I define shame as a silent, hurtful, and misleading emotion because it
Mm,
misleads you into thinking that you're not lovable. It misleads you into thinking that you're not valuable, that you are anything but who you are called and created to be. And so it misleads you into thinking that you are something other than, right? And so it tells you these lies that show up in your life. Like you said, I could never be a good steward of money, right? Shame tells you that like you should know better. And shame is like you're this age, and at your big age you don't know this. And shame keeps
Mhm.
you in this cycle of it's a cycle that it keeps you in. So not only does it attack what you've done, but it attacks who you are.
Wow.
It attacks the very core of who you are. And so when we get in this place of shame, it attacks our identity. It attacks our
Mhm.
purpose. It keeps us in isolation. It tells us that no one else is going through this. Like you're the only one. And so you have to isolate yourself so no one can know the things that you've done or the things that you've experienced. And like yourself, I had shame even around money because I was a banker. I worked in banking for 18 years. So how could you be in banking and not know how to manage your own checkbook? Like that was a lot. And so it keeps you stuck in this cycle of, like I talk about in the book, just going through that revolving door until you deal with the root of why you're dealing with this shame. And it leads to, self condemnation, self criticism, that self judgment, the self doubt. Shame focuses on self. And so when we begin to expose that, it begins to break off the shame. And the more you speak, the more shame loses its power. And so it misleads you into thinking you gain your power when you realize I am none of these things that shame is telling me. I am lovable. I am capable. I am, a money saver. I am, these things that shame would try to tell me that I'm not. And so that's
Wow.
what I truly believe shame does. It keeps us, it misleads us into these things. And it keeps us stuck. And so we really have to begin to expose it. And shame thrives in the dark. And so when you begin to bring light to it, it loses its grip on you.
Wow, that right there is a whole testament. And I have to say that very recently, I had a conversation with my best friend. This is like hard for me to admit, but I have a lot of shame around money. And you kind of mentioned around like, oh, you're this age and you haven't figured it out yet. Like, I carry so much shame around the decisions that I made. Even though I can give myself grace and compassion, I still feel
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm still working through
Yeah.
it. And I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine where I was like, I am terrified to be in a relationship and to open myself up around my money story, the
Mm-hmm.
things that I've done with my money and where my money is and all the decisions that I've made. I feel so terrified to open
Yeah.
myself up and be vulnerable with someone around that shame that I carry. And you mentioned putting light on it, that when you put light on it, it doesn't have power anymore. And so my friend actually looked at me and she said, okay, so I want you to have the conversation with me that you're scared to have with someone else. And I had that conversation with
Mm-hmm.
her. And she looked at me and she said, I love you. And I tell you, like, that was the biggest release for me because it was the first time that I had spoken my actual shame out into the world. And it felt like a release. And so I'm so happy you said, like, shame keeps you isolated, shame keeps you not wanting to be open. But the way and the
Mm-hmm.
path to releasing it is to shed light on it. That's so beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome.
You
I
have
love that.
to, because other than that, if you allow it to keep you in that space of isolation, you're not able to be who you were fully created to be. You're not able to walk in your power. You're not able to walk in your authority. You're not able to walk in the things that were meant for you if you allow shame to keep you in that place of hiding, right? So shame calls us to hide. We hide behind sometimes that false humility, right? Shame
Mhm.
keeps us in that place, but the more you speak about it and speaking it in safe places, it matters speaking in safe places where you find safety, where you find comfort, right? And so when we begin to surround ourselves with that community of people who can provide that, and until the muscle is strengthened to where you don't need the community as much as you have, it's like, man, I found my stride. I found my power. And shame can't tell me anything other than, you
Yeah.
know, shame can't tell me anything because now I'm walking in my light. I'm walking in my power. I'm walking in who I was created to be.
I love that. I love that so much. I'm like smiling ear to ear because it's so true. And I love how you talk about like having the community of people who are going to love you through that transition and through sharing your pain and sharing your shame and are going to love you anyway. Like it is so incredibly important to have that group of people, those friends, those loving supporters. That's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. So I wanna read something from your book that really I was on a plane to California reading your book, and when I read this piece, I have to say that I was so moved to tears because it was hard for me to read it, so I couldn't imagine what it was like for you to live it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to start shifting into your story of your abortion and your
Mm-hmm.
husband. So he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't your husband at the time, but
No, he
your
wasn't.
your
No.
now husband, who you had this child with, or you got pregnant with. I want to read this portion of the book. It'll be a little challenging for me to even read it, but I want to ask you a few questions about it. So this is on page 32 of the book. One day, the reality that I was really pregnant hit me, and I found myself standing alone in my aunt's yard. No one was home, and I had just come down the street from a friend's house. I remember standing there under the big tree with the big summer sun shining down on me. Out of nowhere, I started hitting my stomach, thinking that maybe I could somehow make myself lose this baby. It was still early, punch after punch, but nothing was happening. Was I not punching hard enough? What exactly was I looking for to happen? When you're in this terrible mindset, you will do the unthinkable. Right now, you might be judging me saying, how could she possibly have thought that punching herself in the stomach could cause a pregnancy loss? Honestly, I didn't know. I just knew that I could not have this baby. It saddens me to think that my 18-year-old immature mind wasn't comprehending what was happening. Why wasn't anyone there for me? What were we going to? Can you just tell me what was going on in your mind at that time? That is such a, like, I don't even have a word to describe it. Like, I was trying to figure out my emotions, even just as a reader reading it. Tell me what you were going through in that moment.
In that moment, it was a lot because I'm in a totally different town living with a relative, and my mom has no clue what is happening with me. And it feels like I'm living this all by myself. And of course, as you read in the book, I'm also thinking I'm having this baby by a guy that I don't even know if I'm going to be with him because he had just had a baby in October, and here I am in May, June, July, getting pregnant. And so I felt alone. And like you said, I didn't have the words, and I still don't even have the words. But in my mind, it just felt like, what if I could just do this, then I wouldn't have to maybe go through the abortion. What if I could just hit myself hard enough and I could just cause this to happen without having to deal with maybe what is to come with the decision that I've made. And so handling that by myself was the worst thing ever because it's like I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have anyone to ask questions or help me to process what I was going through. And I don't even know how I even got to that point. I just remember standing under that tree and just hitting myself. Like, again, it was just like, I don't know where the thought came from, but it was just like maybe we could do this. And so it was just really really hard to wrap my mind around being pregnant when I knew that there were opportunities that I had and knowing that I really didn't have a great relationship with my mom. And so it was just like, man, why couldn't I just have someone to be there for me? And I thought that I had a friend, and that friend went and told someone. And so it was just a lot that I was dealing with by myself, but it was the hardest thing ever to just navigate alone. And so again, like you said, I really don't have the words for what I was experiencing, but I knew that like it was hard
Yeah.
as an
Yeah.
18-year-old, and especially still not having dealt with the shame already from the previous time, right? And so here I am being pregnant with someone's baby that was already with someone at the time. and not dealing with that. And so it was just a whirlwind of things. And it just felt like I don't even know how it feels to be in a tornado, but if I could imagine, those were the feelings that I had. Like it's just, it's just a
Yeah.
spiral of things that were happening.
Yeah. Do you think that the shame was almost kind of like a driver for what you were going through in that moment? Because I sometimes feel like often we carry these very heavy emotions, these negative emotions like shame and fear and worry and anxiety. In fact, I realized very recently I'm addicted to being worried. Like it actually is something that my body is addicted to. And if I'm not
Yeah.
in a state of worry, I make stuff up in my head to be worried
Yeah.
about just to get that emotion to come up. It's wild.
Right.
But do you think in some way that the shame that you were experiencing through your life at that point was somehow almost like manifesting in this experience? Was maybe making you kind of do things to your body, hit yourself that you probably wouldn't have done otherwise?
Yeah. Looking back, yes, now, yes, I can say that because at the time, I didn't even know that it was shame that I was dealing with. I
Yeah.
didn't have words to put to
Yeah.
those emotions, to those feelings. But looking back now, I can say that very much so it was shame manifesting, there. And it was also the thought of being judged by people, right? In the fact that you're with someone who's already with someone, the shame that comes with that. So I can honestly say, yes, it was shame manifesting. And that continual saying of, see, you're not valuable, you're not lovable, you're making constant mistakes, and everything that you do would be a mistake. and
Yeah.
and that is what happens when you don't know yourself. And I didn't know myself. I had no clue as to who I was, or how to navigate these things. And so yes, shame was definitely manifesting in my life at that time, to have to do the things that I was doing.
Yeah. I love how you also say you didn't necessarily know that that was what you were experiencing at the time, right?
Mhm.
You talk about forgiveness, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think a large component of what everyone needs to hear is that oftentimes we do things, we experience things, and we carry shame around them. But part of that is recognizing that we didn't know what we were even experiencing in that moment, and that you
Yeah.
had to grow into the woman that you are today to even recognize that you were carrying what you were carrying. And so we have to give ourselves so much grace and
Yes.
compassion for the things that we have gone through in our lives, because it's almost kind of like we didn't know any better. And I think it's
Yes.
important for people to understand that you didn't have the verbiage, you didn't know, you didn't understand what you were going through, and that it's okay.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay that you didn't know, at that time. It's okay. Even if you don't know right now, it's still okay.
Yeah, 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 it's okay. I love that. So you did end up having an abortion, and you say that your
Mhm.
abortion was driven by fear. Can you talk to me a little
Yes.
bit about how fear and shame can, at least for you, maybe how it was connected, or even how it can be connected, fear and shame?
Yes. So shame and fear are kind of like partners in crime. They work together.
Yeah.
Right? They work together. They're like the Thelma to Louise, right? And so they work to keep us trapped. And that's how, I felt, because what shame does is shame will keep you hiding. And it is that fear of people knowing what you've done, right? The fear of exposure. And shame also comes with that fear of rejection. And we call it self-protection, right? And so shame will tell you these things, and they feed off of each other. If I have shame, then fear is also at play, because again, they're working together to make sure that we don't move beyond where we're supposed to be. And there's that fear of vulnerability, right? And we start to pretend, and we stay stuck because of fear of failure. And so they play off, they feed into each other. They are partners in crime, making us feel, these things. And shame would tell me, you don't say this, because you're going to put yourself out there and people are going to make fun of you. And so fear kicks in and says, you know what? That's right. Don't. don't you
Yeah.
dare say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so they worked together to keep us in this place. And also it was like also the shame, the fear of that too was when I was a kid, I had eczema really, really bad. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember one kid telling me I had it so bad on my face and my hands, and he was like, "You have AIDS. We don't want to play with you." And
Oh,
so saying those things, it was also a constant reminder in the back of my head. Shane would tell me, see, if you say this, people won't play with you. No one will, gravitate to you. And so fear was like, that's right. Let's not say this. Let's keep hiding. Let's stay in our shell. Let's continue to hide behind this wall. And so I had to really start doing the work because it was like I know that there's more for me. I know that there's something out there for me, but I can't get to that until I start doing the work. And so shame feel it is the fire to fear, right? And it just keeps us in this place of it's like quicksand almost. The more we sit there, the more we sink into darkness, the more we sink into depression sometimes, the more we sink into these feelings that feel impossible to get out of. And so they work together to really say that you're protecting yourself or keeping that secrecy part so no one would know these things about you. But I had to come to a place of realization. You can't tell me anything that I haven't already thought about myself.
yeah.
And you can't put me in hell because I had already put myself in hell. And so having that mindset of anything that you have to say is extra because I've already thought these things about myself. So I had to really get to the place of where I can work on myself so that shame didn't rule me. I ruled shame. And that I began to rule fear and fear didn't rule me. And so again, shame and fear, they're like partners in crime. They work together to keep you stuck and keep you in a place of isolation and to keep you in a place to where you don't see who you were created to be. It's like blinders.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you say this is such an amazing comment that you mentioned of like almost kind of no one can say anything worse than I've said to myself. And I often really think of this concept of you're actually the only one in the arena. There is nobody else there. The only one that you are fighting is yourself. You are fighting those mindsets. You're fighting those limiting beliefs. And so it's interesting that you say, like, no one can say anything worse than I say to myself. But
Yeah.
that gives you a sense of power where it's like, okay, well, if I'm my own worst critic, then I'm the only one that I have to overcome. There isn't
Mm-hmm.
a battle, there isn't an army, it's just me. And for me, when I realized that, that gave me a sense of power because it was just like, okay, well, if it's just me in the arena, I just have to overcome one person. And I just have to love one person. And I just have to fight one person. And it's really a valuable way to kind of think about it.
Yes, because I always say you have the enemy, which are other people, and then you have enemy. And enemy is the greatest one that you have to overcome
Yeah.
because you have all the voices in your head, whether you've picked them up or not, but you have the voices of family members who told you you would never be enough, or you would be just like your dad or just like your mom. And you have all of these voices that are going on, and it's just like, I have to quiet those and overcome the things that I'm thinking about myself that have been ingrained in me, right? And so sometimes it's not the enemy, it's the enemy who we have is the biggest thing that we have to overcome, just like you said.
Yeah, that's so powerful, the inner me. Ooh, wow, yeah, I like that. So I want to talk about your daughter, Rihanna. So
Yes.
you actually had, I love the story because there was so much that you went through with Rod, with the abortion. There's a lot of emotions in the book, including the emotions that you both shared after you went through the abortion. The tears that even he experienced and the sadness that he experienced along with you. But you did end up staying with Rod. There's a beautiful love story where you moved to Atlanta, right? Together?
Yes. He moved first and I moved after I graduated
Yeah,
college.
absolutely. And then you ended up having your daughter, Rihanna. And
Hmm.
what I thought was so inspiring about the story was Rayanna actually triggered the shame wounds to come back up. So she actually re-triggered the shame. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to experience, I'm sure, immense joy for having this beautiful human, but then also having to go through the grief of the abortion, almost kind of like re-experience it, and then also the shame. What were you going through in that moment?
So I moved to Georgia in 2006. And one of the first things my grandmother told me was, don't go to Georgia and get pregnant.
You
And
mentioned
what
that in
did
the
I do?
book. I was like, and then what did she do?
Get pregnant. But I knew abortion was off the table because I knew the hell that I was already in at that moment. So I was like, we're going to have to handle this the best way we can. And I
Mhm.
remember being at work and talking to my friend, and I just broke down to her and I said, how can I take care of one when I've given up another? And so
Mm.
it was that feeling of, like you said, the shame, of that, of how could you be a mother or be a great mother when you've already given, up one? So how can you do this? And she comforted me in that moment. But then the day came when I actually had her. And 2 weeks after she was born, my mom was here helping me with her. And I remember I would pick her up and she would start crying. But when my mom picked her up, she stopped crying. And I remember running out to my car. And if you have ever lived in Atlanta in the summertime, they call it Hotlanta for a reason. Okay. It's called Hotlanta for a reason. I ran out to the car because my husband, Rod, was in Mississippi. He was going to see my bonus son because he lives with his mom in Mississippi. And I ran out to the car. I didn't turn the car on. So I'm sitting in this hot car, no windows down, no anything. And I call him and I say, she doesn't love me. Because in my mind, because I picked her up and she started crying, she didn't love me. And I told him, I said, every time my mom picks her up, she stops crying. And it was like the enemy was letting me know, see, this is what you will have to deal with because of the decision that you have made. And so shame kept me in this place of not being able to give her what she deserved. And in that moment, I was like, I don't have love to give her because I don't even have love. And so shame kicked in to say, you couldn't be a good mother. It reminded me of, see, she doesn't love at 2 weeks old. How could you even possibly think that a 2 week old knows what love is? But when you're battling those emotions of shame, it tells you these things. But no one had told me at that time what postpartum depression was and what it felt like and what these things were, and that children can actually feel when you are stressed. Like, I didn't know that. But again, shame came in to say, see, you won't be a good mother. See, she will never love you because of this decision that you chose to make. And so, but it was just like, okay, I guess I needed to go through those things to understand, okay, we really need to get some healing. Like, we really need to work on this, or else you will be detached from her. Because I didn't come from a family where we hugged and we loved and we said, I love you, and all of those things. My daughter was very touchy feely. And when I was like, wait a minute, hold up, like, we're getting too close here. Okay, back up. But she really taught me how to love. And it was because of her that I really had to begin that work, because I would see things in her that she was mirroring from me. And I was like, oh no, she will not endure what I've endured. And so having to do that work, and I remember she was 12 years old at this time now, where my husband was like, does she know exactly what it is that you do? And so I was like, I don't know, because I was hosting girls' conferences for young ladies and giving them free prom dresses, for those that couldn't afford to. And so I called her downstairs and I asked her, I said, do you know what an abortion is? And so she gave me her definition of what she thought it meant. And I told her my story and the wisdom that came from her when she said, well, thank you for choosing me. It was words that I didn't know that I needed to hear from her at that time. And I do believe that that also helped to break shame within me of the guilt of giving up one, but also choosing her.
That is so deep. That's so deep. So how old was she when you had that conversation with her about abortion?
She was 12. And I figured that was the right time to have it because she was like in fifth grade, getting ready to go into middle school. So I'm like, the best time is now because
Yeah.
if I don't say something, they're already talking about these things, fifth grade and middle
Gosh,
school.
yeah.
So I need to approach it before anybody else could get to it or she found out some other way. So I was like, I'm going to have this conversation with her because I could remember a time when I couldn't go to my mom or parents to have a conversation about anything. And having that conversation with her at 12 has opened the door to where she comes and tell me everything. And she's like, Mom, you know things that my friends don't even know. And so as a parent, that makes you feel great because it's like when we begin to have that conversation, it opens up doors for our children and it helps to have that relationship with our kids to where they're not sneaking around, doing things. And it's like, I'm going to have it, or else social media is going to have the conversation. And I don't want social media to have the conversation with her. So I'd rather just, approach it head on so that she gets an understanding from me and, get details that social media would not be able to provide for her.
Yeah, I find it so beautiful that you worked so much on the healing part when she was young and really like working so that she wouldn't feel that what you were experiencing and that you could give her the love she deserved. But even at 12 years old, that having that conversation with her brought you another degree of peace just by her making that statement of I'm glad you chose me. And I find that like often healing comes in so many different stages and it can almost even come in a lifetime where it's so beautiful to hear that there was healing that happened in so many different ways and so many different phases and at so many different points. So that's really
Mhm.
just so absolutely beautiful. I also love it because shame, your mom felt shame getting pregnant and didn't necessarily want to like tell anyone what she was going through. You felt the shame, but now with your daughter, you have so much openness and open conversation and open communication to the point where she always knows that you've got her back. And isn't that what
Yes.
we would have wanted back in the day when we were experiencing what we were experiencing?
Exactly. It is. Because I'm like, I was sneaking around. I was doing things that I had no business doing, right?
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I'm like,
I know I
I
was
didn't
too.
have that.
We all were.
Having, doing these things. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. I love that. So I want to talk about forgiveness now because I want to transition into how you really worked through this. And forgiveness is like huge on the top of my list. I think forgiveness is one of those things where if you can truly forgive those who you feel have wronged you, but more importantly, forgive yourself. There is so much freedom that comes from that. So, can you tell me a little bit about how forgiveness played a role in your healing journey and how did you do this thing called forgiveness? Because I think we all are trying to forgive, but what did that look like for you?
So for me, forgiveness was something I didn't know that I needed at the time either. And it wasn't until my pastor introduced me to this book called The True Measure of a Woman by Lisa Bevere. And I remember getting to chapter 2 of that book. And I don't know about y'all. Y'all ever got to a book, you ever got to a book and you just feel like it just changed the trajectory of your life to the point where you can't even finish it because it just uprooted everything? Like that's what I feel this book did for me, and I haven't picked it up since. I probably should finish it, but at the time, it's what I needed. And
Yeah.
so there was 2 questions in chapter 2 that she asked. And the first question was, what is it that you have in your closet that you need to clean out? And I knew that for me, it was time to clean abortion out of my closet. But I also knew that too, it was time to clean out. I didn't realize at the time my grandmother had passed away in 2006 after I moved to Georgia. And she was like my rock. She was my everything. And I didn't know that I was going through depression at that time. Depression on top of not being healed from the abortion, on top of the shame, on top of all the things. It's just like a layered cake. And so I knew that I needed to clean that out of my closet too. And the second question was, what is it that you have of value to give to someone else? And I just remember crying and I said, God, why did you create me with no purpose? Like, I have no value. So what am I here on earth for? And at the time, no one knew, but I had this sharp pain in my stomach almost as a reminder of what I had done. And so we met back up to talk about this book. And I told my pastor what I had done. And I told her, I said, every day for 10 years, I prayed and asked God to forgive me for what I had done. And when I said that to her, she said, Sweetie, God forgave you the very first time that you prayed. And that was the door to forgiveness being open. And that was the gift that I didn't know that I needed. And when she said that, I haven't had that pain in my stomach since then, because that was, now I understand that the pain that I was holding in my stomach, the pain that I was having, was unforgiveness against myself. And just like that book says, the body keeps score. I didn't know that I was holding this within myself, but it was a gift that I didn't know that I needed to open at that time. And so many times the gift is there, but we're leaving the gift under the tree unopened. We're leaving the gift there, not knowing that if we possibly open it, if there's something on the inside that we can receive. And so forgiveness was a gift that I decided that I needed to open at that time. And so for those that are dealing with unforgiveness, forgiveness is a gift. Decide to open the gift. It's not a re-gift. It's not the ugly sweater that your aunt gives you at Christmas time. It's something beautiful. And if you just receive it, it does, so many wonders to you. And now I can say, like what you said, that compassion piece, that forgiveness brings compassion. And it's like, I'm not the only one making mistakes. I'm not the only one that is gonna mess up. And so forgiving myself and understanding that these things are gonna happen. As long as I'm here on earth, it's inevitable that I'm gonna make mistakes, that I'm gonna mess up, but it doesn't define who I am. And I tell my clients that I work with, unforgiveness is like a ball and chain. The more you hold on to it, the heavier it gets as you try to walk. And so we don't realize that the word for forgiveness means to release. It means to pardon. So when you forgive, you release that thing from you. And it's almost also just like carrying luggage. When you get home from taking a trip, you don't take that luggage to work with you, right? You release it and you do the necessary things that you need to do to put everything in its place. And that's how forgiveness is. When we walk in unforgiveness, we're carrying that luggage with us wherever we go. It's showing up in places that we don't want it to show up in. And it's that dirty laundry that needs cleaning now that we need to take out of the suitcase and bring it, ourselves and just wash it, make it clean. And so forgiveness is releasing that. And so the more you hold on to it, the heavier it gets, the more unforgiveness that you hold on to. And it's all in another way that I like to put it is it's holding on to that hot stove. The more you hold on to it, the longer it burns. The more damage it does to you.
Yeah. Wow, there's so much there. And it's so funny that you talk about the suitcase because I've been having this visual of a suitcase a lot, of what is in your suitcase that you're carrying and how do you actually start to let those things go. And so it's a beautiful kind of thing to think about is like, what is in your suitcase? What is in your closet that needs to be
Yeah.
cleaned out? And how can you bring that to the light? I feel like that's such a beautiful message that you're giving us all, is what is there that needs to be brought to the light that you can then release the shame around and really truly start to forgive yourself. I'm curious,
Mhm.
when you think about forgiveness, you kind of mentioned working with your clients around forgiveness. Is there a specific exercise or reflection or something tangible that if someone's like, dang, I really need to let this go, I really need to forgive myself, that you would give someone as, a gift to start the process of forgiveness?
So the thing that I had them to do is visualize. I have them to visualize unforgiveness as this remote control. Like if you've ever played an Xbox or PlayStation. There's a controller there, and there's a person operating that controller. When we operate in unforgiveness, we give the person that we haven't forgiven the power to dictate how we move and how we show up. They're the controller that's moving that avatar from point A to point B. So when we walk in unforgiveness, we let them dictate how we show up. When we walk in that unforgiveness, we are still saying, "Oh, I can't wear this red dress because such and such said I look fat in it," or red is not my color. And so because we are, still holding on to that unforgiveness, they have the power to control if I get to wear red or not. And so I have them to really visualize this person holding this controller, and they're giving them the power to dictate and control what they do, how they show up, and where they go, and the things that they do. And so when you get to visualizing that, you're realizing, oh my gosh, I am allowing them to keep me from receiving and walking in the freedom that I know belongs to me. And so the moment you show up and forgive them, you're releasing the fingers in the hand off of that controller. And now you're taking control of your life. You're taking control of what and taking your power back and showing up in the power of who you are. So just having that visualization, or even if you have kids playing Roblox, right? You get to the person that you're not forgiving, they hold the power to the keyboard. They hold the power to that controller. So taking your power back and realizing, okay, I'm allowing them to do this to me. And forgiveness is not for them. Forgiveness is for you. It's for
Absolutely.
you
I love that.
to be able to operate and walk in the fullness of who you are, not letting them dictate your actions and not having them to dictate, because you're still holding on to this, but they're going on with their lives. They're living
Yeah.
without a care in the world, and they have this control over you, and now it's time to get that control back.
I love that so much. I love that visualization of someone is literally holding the controller of your life and dictating how
Mhm.
you move, what you do, and where you go. And I don't think any of us want anybody dictating any aspect of our life. So I love that visualization of who's got the controller, how are they
Yes.
controlling you, and gaining your power back. Now, I want to talk about you gaining your power back. So, tell us, like, how did this all bring you to what you do today? And what is it that you're doing today? I feel like you're inspiring armies of amazing women and people out there. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how this story brought you to your real passion and your purpose on this earth.
Yes. Well, before I get to that, I want to say one more thing that people can
Yeah.
do. One of the things that I have my clients to do to help with that forgiveness piece, I have them to write what I call a confessions of the heart letter, because we don't realize how much weight words carry. And so through the confessions of the heart letter, I have them to write down everything that's on their heart. And I tell them, if you cry, cry through the writing. If the paper is soaked by tears, that's okay. Get everything out that has been on your heart that you want to say to this person. If you curse, you curse. If you, whatever it is that you want to say, lay it all out there. And then once you write it out, process it, and then we're going to burn it, because this is one bridge that we're not crossing back over. We're burning this bridge to where I am able to release you into that. And I've had people, clients who have burned their letters, and it took 6 to 7 times for them to really burn, because that's how much they were holding on to it, and that's how much it wanted to stay with them and keep them in the place stuck in that unforgiveness. So burn it, write it out. Confessions of the heart letter, write it and burn it, because this is the only bridge that we're not crossing back over. So I just, and to get to your question, one of the things, God began to speak to me and tell me to tell my story. But I was like, I'm not wanting to do that, because who's talking about this? And I don't see anybody that looks like me that is talking about this either. And so I just remember putting it off for about a year, because I'm like, well, maybe we can try blogging, because maybe this will work, because I don't want to do that. Let me try something else. Okay. And so I tried my hand at blogging. That didn't work. And the voice just kept getting louder of, it's time to tell your story. And I remember going to a women's business conference, and I stood up and I said, how can you talk about something taboo in business? And she said, where you just talk about it. And so I began to tell a snippet of my story of going through the abortion and everything. And after, I ran out of the room because I was like, I'm an introvert. What did we just do? Like, we don't do this. Okay. Like, we will sit and be quiet. But I ran out of that room and I began to sob, and I was sobbing. But there was an intermission, and women began to walk up to me and say, "Thank you so much for being brave to share. I too have had one." And I had women who actually asked me to pray for them because they said, "I feel like I won't be able to have another kid because of the decision that I've made." And so it was confirmation and affirmation for me of I am where I'm supposed to be. And so I began to get on podcasts and tell the story and show up. And women coaching was nowhere on my radar, but I had women reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I want to be free. Don't want to deal with this anymore. So can you help me with this?" And so that's how I got to the point of where I am now, just by telling my story and women just seeking me out. And I've had the privilege and honor of working with women in Belgium, New Zealand, the Netherlands, like across, the US as well. And just being able to understand that it may not be the sexy or popular thing, because I've had a hard time with that, because I'm like, God, why can't I have the sexy thing? Why can't I have the popular thing? Why do I have to be the one that talks about this? But I understand that if I don't fulfill the assignment, if I don't show up, then I'm leaving women in the hell that I got out of, and I'm leaving them there in that place. And so I have to show up so that they can get the freedom that they want. I've had women tell me, I've watched YouTube videos, but it still seemed like the woman is still dealing with the hurt and regret. She said, "But when I see you, I see freedom, and that's what I want." And so just being able to show up and understand there are women who deserve the joy, who deserve this happiness, who deserves this freedom. And so I got here by way of sharing my story and just being obedient to what was being asked, of me. And so just showing up and just being able, like I said, there were things that I thought it was never on my radar. And even by sharing my story, I now help women in prison. I am in prison ministry. I volunteer for the Department of Corrections to go speak to women who are in prison. And I didn't think that that would be, something that I would do. It was never on my radar. But when we begin to show up and do the thing that we're called to do, it brings you to a place of where it opens doors, but also helping people that you didn't know that or think that you were called to help.
So
And so
beautiful.
that's how
I
I got
love
here.
that. I love that. It's such a testament to how your pain can become your passion, how your pain can become your purpose, and how your story is so important to share. So I love all of that. I really do. It's so beautiful and magnificent. I have one last question for you, because that book, The Measure of a Woman's Worth, I think it was called, or The Measure of a Woman,
The
is
true
that
measure
it?
of a woman.
The True Measure of a Woman. You mentioned that book, and I actually ended up ordering it on Amazon because I was like, I feel like I need to read this. But after everything that you've gone through, your healing, your reinvention, your transformation, your change, what do you think is the true measure of a woman?
That's a good question, because I think the true measure of a woman is not found in her achievements, is not found in the accolades, the appearance, or the roles that she play in. It's found in her heart. It's in the resilience of showing up, of walking in your power. It's in her character. So the true measure of a woman is being able to allow the core things of you to really shine. There's this quote that I love by his name is Doug, and I forgot his last name. But it says, "Your identity cannot be fabricated, but emerges when you have the courage to let it out." Like, your identity can't be found or fabricated, but it emerges when you have the courage and the bravery to let it out. And so the true measure of a woman is being that courageous, resilient woman who doesn't let the things that she's gone through define who she is. is showing up and showing your character, showing your heart, showing, your power, not letting society and religious things keep you in this box, but breaking free from that. And so that's what I feel the true measure of a woman is her showing up in her power and her resiliency, and showing up and letting the world know, you may try to beat me down or try to box me in, but I can't be.
Well, I would have to say that that is exactly how I would define you and your story and who you are today. So I just think that you've hit the nail on the head with that one. I mean, you really are such a magnificent individual. Your
Thank you.
story that you write in this book, it's so powerful. You've given us a glimpse through this conversation, and I appreciate that glimpse, but the full power is actually in these pages and in what you write and in your
Thank
full
you.
journey in this book. So thank you so much for sharing with it us with it today. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap us up and we say goodbye for this amazing episode of Real Raw and Reinvented? Anything else you would love to leave with the guests with?
Yes, I would just like to let someone know who's listening, abortion did not abort the promises. There's still a purpose and there's still a destiny for you. And though you may not have had a physical abortion, you've had things in your life that have tried to abort your destiny, whether it be divorce, whether it be addiction, whether it be drugs, alcohol, whatever the case may be. But understand you still have a purpose, and that pain can be turned into purpose. And so no matter what the story is, no matter what your past holds, there's still promise for you. There's still destiny for you. There's still people who need you out in the world. And so don't be afraid to show up. Don't be afraid to tell the story. Break the chains of shame by speaking. Shame loses its power, because the thing is, shame keeps secrets. Secrets create stress, and stress creates sickness. And we can avoid that by not letting it be held in our bodies, but speaking out loud. Shame loses its power when we begin to speak.
Oh my God, that is so powerful. Yeah, you got me wanting to speak all my shame out there. I'm telling everybody everything. I love it. Thank you so much, Latoya, for joining us today. This book, Unveiled Freedom, magnificent. I am definitely going to have the link posted everywhere so that everyone could grab a copy. Everyone say thank you. Thank you to Latoya for her amazing, amazing story that she shared today. And thank you, Latoya, for being here with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.